Well, it must be said that these days at least one doesn't get bored, that's for sure. Yesterday, I was on a flight when what has now been defined as the biggest blackout in the history of Spain occurred. And guess where I was heading? Exactly to Spain, to Valencia to be precise. A city that I love and visit often because I spend several periods of the year here. We landed around 1:30 p.m. and the electricity hadn't disappeared. It had been gone for about an hour, so no one knew anything yet. So to document what was happening, I recorded and posted this quick video on my social media channels. So I am in Valencia, Spain. I just landed here. The situation is quite surreal in the sense that, apart from the fact that clearly no one told us anything, but I just found out that there is a blackout apparently throughout Spain, meaning there is no power, no electricity. In fact, this is the line for taxis, just to give you an idea, meaning there's about an hour and a half wait to get a taxi, because clearly the metro, for example, is currently stopped, as well as a whole series of other public transport systems that are completely out of order. And so it's a somewhat surreal situation because then simultaneously they don't work. The phone lines aren't working, the networks aren't functioning. I managed to connect after several attempts. In fact, let's see if I'll be able to upload this video to the airport's Wi-Fi, which offers 15 minutes of free connection, but it's a panic, so to speak, calm for now. Not for myself, of course, but for the people who are very disoriented, there's a bit of confusion because then nothing is known. And many of the people who have been here don't know the reasons for these disruptions because there is no kind of notice, there is no communication. And what else? Nothing. There are supermarkets open, I was told, without lights except for the emergency ones from generators. At the moment, with the information I was able to gather, the reasons for this blackout are unknown. Nothing serious has happened, apparently. I mean, there haven't been any explosions or anything related to war, etc. It's something related to the national grid electric, but that's nothing. And so we'll see how the situation develops. In the BV, with a bit of curiosity. You know, it's like going back a century back in time, but with today's technology, so the service disruptions are quite significant. If I can, I'll keep you. I'll invite you to stay updated, and that's it. Maybe also write to me in the comments if you have updates, more information than I do, because I can't check too many things right now. Okay, thank you very much, bye. It's not the first time I've found myself in similar situations. After all, when traveling especially, it can happen, and as I've said many times, it's good to try to face the unexpected in the calmest and most serene way possible. It's possible, also because you have to take them into account, especially when traveling. It happened to me just a few months ago in January when I went to Cuba. In one location, we discovered that practically every day the power went out for at least 4 to 5 hours, so we had to in some way adapt. But the most constructive experience I had in this regard was the Bay Storm of 2018 that hit northeastern Italy, the Veneto region, and in particular the Belluno area where I was at the time and where it practically forced us to live without electricity for almost a week. With all the chaos, you can imagine in a place, you know, where there's also a certain climate and other issues. In fact, you should know that I not only have a survival kit, but I have several, and they are scattered around the world. Well, yes, and I've had them for several years, long before the European Commission recommended it. But I will talk about this in a separate video that I will publish soon. In the meantime, however, I'll show you how I tackled this emergency thanks to a small tool that is extremely useful in cases like this. There has been an electrical blackout for a few hours here in Spain, but I have my trusty FM radio with a dynamo. That's the secret, with a dynamo. So it doesn't need batteries. You can listen to it at any time. And it's important in these cases because while all communications are interrupted, radio communications are the last to go out in an emergency. In fact, you heard, because the government is providing a whole series of extremely useful information. For example, they just said that initially it was thought they would restore electricity in Spain within 6 to 8 hours. Now, they have even suggested that instead it will take 7 days. Do you understand the difference in perspective? 7 days? If there were a 7 day blackout, things would be much more challenging compared to 6 hours. So it's good to know in these cases, even the light. In all of this, I also managed to send a short text to a colleague of mine who is in Italy who had access to my social media channels and who used my digital clone to disseminate a message from me, namely this video. Hi, I am Mateo's digital clone. He is currently in Spain, where there is an electrical blackout and he is unable to communicate directly. However, he managed to send me a short update text, which I will now read to you. Here in Valencia, for the moment, the situation is calm, but the power is still out. And around 6 p.m., the water supply was also interrupted. So the inconveniences are increasing. Supermarkets and shops are closed. A couple of hours ago, I managed to do some shopping at a small grocery store before all the products and drinking water ran out. Long queues of people were forming, waiting. Cellular data networks are not working except sporadically, very weakly, and for very brief moments. Even text messages and phone calls are intermittent. I am able to receive information and updates thanks to a small FM radio with a dynamo. The authorities have asked people not to leave their homes unless for emergencies, and indeed the streets are emptying. Traffic lights are not working, and all public transport is at a standstill. From what I understand, in some areas of Spain, especially in the north due to proximity to France, and in the south due to proximity to Morocco, the power grid has been restored. Having an induction cooktop, I have no way to cook, but I will soon light the barbecue to prepare a dinner with the food I have in the freezer. And of course, they are naturally defrosting. I am not lacking candles nor good wine, and I am in excellent company with my family. So, for the moment, despite some minor inconveniences, everything is fine. I reflect on the fact that when you look at it closely, a blackout of a few days would do good for many out there and in general for the world we have created. It would force us to slow down, to rediscover many things we have lost, to truly reconnect. So, being in this particular situation, I try to make the best of it. I will give you further updates when possible. Good evening. Here, a note I would like to add is the reaction of the Spanish people in the face of an emergency, like this. I have seen them particularly relaxed. I did not witness exaggerated reactions or panic attacks or other similar things. Much calmer, much more serene than what I have seen Italians handle similar situations. We should take this into consideration and perhaps reflect on it. And finally, the epilogue, the electricity is back. And at that point, I recorded a final video to update all the people who had written to me and were following me on my social channels. This is the video. As you can see, the lights are back on. Update at 10:26 p.m., around 10:30 in the evening from Valencia, Spain. About an hour and a half ago. An hour and a half ago, the lights came back on. And all the other services connected to it, electricity, not just the lights to be precise. So the water and everything else are back too. Good? Good? Especially good because it came back before dark or just as it was getting dark. And when you find yourself in big cities, darkness in such situations is almost like a curfew, right? With a whole series of chaos in terms of public order and safety, so the alarm has been lifted. The reasons are still completely unknown even here, in the sense that they talk about atmospheric events, mysterious, anomalous, peculiar. There is still the hypothesis of a cyber attack, but the authorities nonetheless are not ruling anything out. For the rest, let's say, it was a somewhat dystopian afternoon, a surreal afternoon, because yes, there was a sort of rush on supermarkets, which then some closed, others did not. A whole series of things, however. In the end, indeed, it has subsided for the moment. In all this, from what I understand, through the official communications from the authorities, which here are disseminated through X for Rolex, Twitter, or the radio and other means of communication, there remains a sort of preventive alert, because not everything has been restored 100%, and therefore things can happen. New blackouts, in fact, they advise not to travel, to try to reduce electricity consumption, so not to overuse it, to reduce movements, a whole series of small limitations, but let's say entrusted to the good sense of the citizens. So we will see how the situation evolves in the coming days, but for now, everything is very calm. You hear quite a few ambulance and police sirens, but I believe that, well, it's normal in such a context. Now, the emergency indeed is absolutely subsiding. For the moment, it has subsided, and so that's good. I would like to suggest reading a nice book, a charming book called The End of the Crooked World by Mauro Corona. It envisions a world where at a certain point there is no more electricity, no more light, and all the services we are now accustomed to, of which we are almost slaves, are gone. It's a good read that makes you think, and so I recommend it to you. For the rest, we'll see each other tomorrow, we'll talk tomorrow. If the network is available, if I can communicate with you, or otherwise I'll have my digital clone communicate as I did in the previous video. To conclude, I would like to briefly address the issue of why all this happened, the reasons, right? Because now this is the big question. To understand why there was this blackout. Quite a big one because, well, it affected all of Spain, Portugal, a part of Morocco, a part of France, and apparently other European countries as well. As you've already heard from my previous videos that I've shown you, the Spanish authorities have mentioned several times a possible particular and anomalous meteorological event. Initially, however, they had talked about a possible cyber attack. Now the investigations are clearly ongoing, but the truth we will most likely never know. Regardless of this, as I have said many times, I repeat it again. Today, I believe that seeing conspiracies everywhere is as serious as not seeing conspiracies anywhere. Mine is always an invitation to clarity, to stay grounded, to not get carried away by conspiracy theories because they are not always and everywhere. Sure, maybe this time they could have pulled the plug on them, because recently Spain has backed out of contracts related to Israel, or perhaps they have stepped on someone else's toes. It could instead be an experiment or tests or warnings from the global establishment. There can be many things. Anything is possible. Personally, I don't rule anything out. However, in my opinion, one should always try to analyze the facts with clarity and make sense of them. The question is my theory plausible? What I think? Because you see, even the hypothesis that it was a blackout, deliberately caused by someone or something, has a whole series of logical fallacies. For example, the fact that we know well how certain political and financial groups have been pushing for years towards a future that goes in the direction of digital, not electric and so on and so forth, causing what happened in Spain in the last 24 hours, on the other hand, leads the population to take steps back regarding these new technologies and these new lifestyles, because now many more people will clearly be hesitant to buy an electric car, rather than relying on technologies that are exclusively based on energy systems linked to electricity. So you understand that one thing clashes with the other. But I repeat, anything is possible. Beyond these considerations, once again, I noticed how fragile we are as a civilization, as a culture, as a society that we have created. And so it would be worth asking ourselves where we are going, if this much touted progress is actually leading us to an evolution or a devolution, whether it might be time to reconsider a whole series of development models, to which we are instead heading, blindly meeting. That's all for now. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment below this video, and we'll see each other, or maybe not, at the next Blackout.